For Rilke also, I wish I had that quote exactly in my head, but he said, love is when two solitudes bend down and honor each other.
Mm.
Two solitudes. I see our marriage, and I would like to say love as a conjunctio, or understand together that marriage is not the official marriage. Marriage is a relationship. I'm not talking about saying yes, I do, or no, right, the sacrament of marriage. I'm talking about a relationship. A deep relationship is a conjunctio every day.
Susan Tiberghien, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you for writing. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm happy to talk about soul with you.
Yeah, Soul and Marriage. I've been reading your latest book, uh, Seasons of Love, and it is so wonderful to read this book written by someone who's been married for over, what, 66 years?
Right?
And you're in your 90s now.
That's right.
And you told
We
me this
both
is,
are. My husband's 90, will be 92, and I'll be 91 this year.
wow. And I think you said this is your first podcast.
Correct. I have recorded courses for several Jungian platforms in the States and also for the Jung Society of Washington, D.C. So I'm used to that, but I haven't done a podcast. I have a granddaughter who works in podcasts in Paris. So
Hmm.
I've talked with her, but that's all.
Well, I'm honored that this is your first one. I love talking to elders. I was thinking about it leading up to this interview, and I've probably recorded more podcasts with people over 75 than any other podcast out there. And so I was thinking maybe I should change the name of the podcast to like Speaking with Elders or something.
Instead of what it's howling,
Howl in the wilderness,
howling in the wilderness.
like a lone
Well,
wolf
that's
howling in
sort
the
of what
wilderness.
elders are doing.
Yeah, right. The good ones, yeah, I think are. Yeah, I think of myself as a lone wolf howling in the wilderness of
Yeah.
modernity
Yeah.
sometimes, crying out for more soul. Well, let's talk about this. Well, maybe before we talk about your book, a question I love to ask people who have been working in depth psychology and in Jungian psychology for a long time. How do you conceive of soul?
I would go back to how Jung defines soul. It is a simple definition. It's in the Red Book that the soul is our self in the spiritual world.
Hmm.
So you see right away the spiritual world, the physical world, you see the self, and the soul is the self in the spiritual world. And then for some of the courses that I give, I go back to Plato, to Aristotle, and I go through history and Hildegard of Bingen, all different ways of defining our essence, our soul. Plato thought it was ongoing, would be eternal. Aristotle did not. And then we go through history up to Jung and also very often Thomas More, who says that it's a way of experiencing. It's not a thing.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah,
a practice.
yeah. Yeah, like his mentor, James Hillman, called it soul making, following Keats.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
soul is something to be made in this lifetime. Yeah, how do you think we make soul, if that's the case?
I do a lot of active imagination with my soul, and my journaling. I don't journal every day. I journal maybe once a week, not even sometimes, when something really strikes me and I want to write it down and use it perhaps later or reflect about it. Um, and now my journals are mostly active imaginations where really I will see it, an image of the soul and talk to it. So the soul manifest itself in a tree, whatever, and I will focus on that and really speak to the tree as my soul. And lately, I have been doing it, my soul as my soul. It's no longer an image. I see my soul.
Hmm.
And so my active imagination would be that I would ask a question and the soul will answer. And if I am in that intermediate world between the visible and the invisible, between the conscious self and the unconscious, I will be very surprised. The soul, I can, not every time, but often the soul will answer, and I know by the words that they're not mine.
Mhm.
That's the voice of the soul. Like perhaps a good short example is several months ago, I said to my soul, "What do you look like?" And my soul looked at me and almost laughed. And she said, "Well, I look like you because I'm you in the spiritual world."
Mhm.
So,
And did your soul take the form of you at this age, or was it
yes,
yeah?
yes, it did.
So a
It
kind of
does.
a reflection of you in the spiritual
Yep.
world.
Yes.
Aging as you age, you think?
Excuse me?
Aging as you age?
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
That's how it is for me for the moment.
Yeah.
I feel very privileged to be able to do that. And that's what I want to share, as I think we all can speak
Mhm.
to our soul. And then I write it down, of course, and I move on. And I have many different conversations. It's been only recently that I have talked directly to the soul. For 2 or 3 years, it was to an image of the soul.
Mhm. And that's not something that you concocted yourself, but it's something that
Oh
came to
no,
you.
it's from the Red Book completely. No, I have really read and reread the Red Book. It's I ordered it when it came out. I guess it was 2008 about or something, and
Mhm.
I thought that I would be able to handle it, and I could hardly. When it was delivered at the door, I could hardly carry it. Uh, but I have, and I scribble in it, I write in it, and at first I thought I can't touch this, and of course I did, and I go back to it. So that's the Red Book with the stunning pictures and paintings of Jung in it. But I do also have upstairs at my desk here where I am the reader's guide, the reader's edition of it that it's not right close to me now, but which doesn't have the paintings and which is easier to find quickly.
Mhm.
So I am very invested in the Red Book. I just think that following how Jung talked to all those images and pulled them up and later identified it as active imagination, because he was completely dumbfounded by what was happening. And it was only as he progressed that he could, even after his first journaling, 1913, around 1916, 17, that he started to identify it as active imagination.
Mhm. Yeah. I actually like to think of it as interactive imagining, as an
Yes.
interactive process. Active imagination, it kind of grabs my ego and thinks, well, it's me up for me to activate this image or to activate the
Mhm.
exchange in some way. And so I find like just rephrasing it subtly kind of
Very
helps me get into it with the
interactive. Yep.
with the right attitude.
Hmm.
Hmm. I meant when I said, is this something you concocted? I meant the soul image. So I think it's safe to assume that that's something that came and presented itself to you.
Absolutely. And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's just the voice. It depends upon the soul.
Hmm. Yeah, and how it wants to
What
appear.
she wants to do.
She, okay.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
s- what do you think about Jung's
We need a
concept?
few she's in this world.
Yeah. what do you think about Jung's concept of the kind of the binary of the anima, animus, and how, his whole theory around that? What do you think about that? Does it hold up?
I think it does. I think he was perhaps too strict,
Hmm.
but I think in each of us we have both parts. We have the animus and the anima, and they correspond very much to the male and to the female part. I
Hmm.
don't worry about it. I think they're there and they help us to bring them together in our search for wholeness. That was in my book, Writing Toward Wholeness.
Hmm. So have there been male soul figures that have come to you over the years, and has one kind of come forward as a kind of a primary soul image of the male?
No, but certainly the images that a cat, a child that I've talked to, when I find an image that holds the soul for me, so I don't pay much attention whether it's masculine or feminine. But I have not had the image. Well, one time it was a waking dream, and I was swimming. These are the dreams, of course, that I like the most when I'm in water, and I see on the shore a man who resembles very much Jesus of Nazareth, and he's surrounded with other men. So I have had images of men. And as I approach, he is with his feeding them fish. It's a typical biblical story. But I say to him, "Why are you all men? Where are the women?" And they all became women in front of me. It was one of my most unusual happenings in a waking dream.
Huh.
So from the male, I saw him become a woman, and he said, "We are one. We're the
Hmm.
same." So I'm happy with that.
Yeah, that's satisfying.
Yes. I
Some
don't think I've ever shared it before, but when you said, "Have I had an image of a man?" That's the only one that I could bring up
Jesus as the androgyne. That's
as the,
androgynous, both
yes,
male and
yes,
female.
right,
Mhm.
yes, right.
Yeah, that sounds downright heretical.
That's, that's, I- as you, perhaps you've read in the book, I was a practicing Catholic.
Mm.
All through my childhood and through university, I was looking for the mystery, the mystical side of life. And that's what drew me toward the Catholic Church. And from my Protestant church, the Congregational Church, I became Catholic. And with my husband, it was not the love for my husband that drew me. I was on my path before I met my husband at university in France, at a graduate school in France. So we were very committed together and very active in the parishes where we were living and bringing up our children. And then slowly the patriarchy, the lack of the feminine, the lack of the shadow, the evil, I was influenced, I guess. Well, no, I read Answer to Job later. So I started withdrawing from the Catholic Church. And then when one of my daughters was abused by a priest in our parish, and especially when the church refused to recognize it, I no longer I'm no longer Catholic. I still honor my Christian roots, but my religion welcomes all religions and is more at peace, perhaps when I go for a walk every day in the woods.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, I've wrestled with my own Christian inheritance for many years. And I guess where I'm sitting with it now is appreciating the figure of Jesus and his strange teachings that I see as kind of like Zen koans, a lot of those parables, separating that from the church, which I see has just been a big problem since the very beginning, as something
Yeah.
created by men.
I'm sorry. Yes, I feel they kidnapped him.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So
Co-opted at
I have,
least.
it's the Gnostic Gospels that I have read greatly and am close to, and to Sophia.
Hmm. Yeah, and then in that, being open to all the different expressions of the archetypal God images throughout cultures, right?
Right?
Hmm.
Yes.
Someone told me once, when I was kind of explaining, this wrestling and but still being attracted to figures from other traditions that spoke to my soul. He said, "Well, look, a mystic is at home in any church because you can see through the superficial image to what
Yep.
it's pointing
Yes.
toward."
I would agree very
Hmm.
much so.
It seems like in our kind of global world where we have so much information about other religions and other cultures, that seems like for me the healthiest way to be if you can find your way to that kind of position.
Yeah. It took me a long time.
Mm,
And when I circling to the center, an invitation to silent prayer, when I brought that out for a 20th anniversary of its being published, I added an afterword where I explain that I sort of opened the door of my soul and left the Catholic Church.
mm. You've
But
talked
it's I mean, my husband traditionally and is still going to mass on the television. He sees it on the television, the French television every Sunday. I do not.
mm. So how is that in a marriage to have maybe differing views or views that change over time concerning God and religion and devotion? How is that to navigate that?
I'll go to Rilke, who says that love is recognizing the uniqueness of the other, bending down. Remember that in his letters to a young poet, that it's bending down in front of the uniqueness of the other. We used to have the same, share greatly our paths, and they've separated, but they're now they're now one next to the other, side by side. That's one of the books one of my titles. It's not always easy, but it's coming together, which is the word that Jung uses as conjunctio, coming together, and something new comes out. And of course, it was the most obvious is male and female coming together and having their child. But now we come together, and I think probably he his faith has been enriched by the discussion with mine, and mine certainly has with
Mm,
discussing it with him.
hmm. I wanted to talk to you about the conjunctio as an image for a long-lasting marriage. So because it came up, let's just follow that. Uh, I've often talked to younger people who are struggling in their marriage after a few years together, or maybe the kids are growing older and they're coming to a point where maybe the woman, the mother, is starting to look for more freedom in the marriage, and the man is wondering what his role is, and coming up against some of these challenges. And I'm always trying to encourage them to stay with it, even if it feels very challenging, even if it feels like they're growing apart, to think of the marriage as an alchemical vessel of transformation. But the vessel must be strong enough to hold those times where there's tumult, there's disagreement. Um, and so I appreciate the way that you talked about the conjunctio as coming together, not as a merging into one being, but
Right.
retaining your
Right.
individuality.
Yeah.
So could you speak about that a little more?
Well, that's what I was saying for Rilke also. I wish I had that quote exactly in my head, but he said, love is when two solitudes bend down and honor each other.
Mm,
Two solitudes. So I see our marriage, and I would like to say love as a conjunctio, because or understand together that marriage is not the official marriage. Marriage is a relationship.
Hmm.
I'm not talking about saying yes, I do, or no, right. The sacrament of marriage. I'm talking about a relationship. A deep relationship is a conjunctio every day.
Mm.
Is a coming together every day.
Hey, I want to take a moment to speak with you about this channel. Currently, only 11% of viewers are subscribed to the channel. I think those numbers are terrible. So if you're enjoying this content and you want to help out the channel, please take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe. And if you really want to help out the channel, you can become a member of the Howl in the Wilderness Patreon, which will give you access to early release of full ad-free episodes, plus access to the archive of the first 100 episodes of this podcast. It would really help me out and allow me to keep creating content like the interview that you're watching right now. Okay, thanks so much. Now, back to the interview.
So
Every day new, starting anew.
I could have titled Seasons of Love, Love a Conjunctio, but the word frightens too many people.
Yeah.
And specifically, my husband doesn't like it.
Oh, really? What's his aversion to that
I
term?
don't know. The French should be closer to Latin than the Americans, but anyway.
Yeah, maybe his
But you read it
individual.
in the book. I'm speaking of it so often. I mean, you were talking about sharing our faith, sharing the way we practice our, even faith is a different word, is a difficult word. The way we try to approach the sacred.
Mhm.
We share our path. And then in just daily coming together, how we organize our day, how we organize the house, it's always there.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, you've got this great quote from Khalil Gibran: "To wake at dawn with a winged heart and give thanks for another day of loving."
Well,
That
and
daily renewal is so important, hey?
yeah, we do say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
You
then
actually say those words each morning?
yes, one of us, one or the other. Happy day of loving, dear.
Hmm.
Another day. Our marriage is bilingual, and with age, we both go, I've spoken about that also in Seasons of Love. We both go into our earlier worlds. So I'm living in my American world, English, 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 and he is living in his. So that phrase we say in English because that's who it came from.
Hmm. Yeah. That was the first translation, and neither of you speak Arabic or whatever. I don't know what Khalil Gibran spoke or wrote in originally.
Probably, yeah, I don't either.
Yeah, yeah. He was Middle Eastern though, right? I think
Certainly,
Lebanese.
probably, yeah, Lebanon, probably some French because there's so much French there.
Ah, it was
I don't have it in French. I could look for it. I should. I mean, I could
you
avoid
could.
the word should. Um, yeah,
That, that's interesting. So as you get older, you're both like kind of reverting to your mother tongues, and so your conversations, he's speaking French, you understand French, but you're responding in English. Is that the way it is?
we can't really do that. We get mixed up, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
because of my husband's Parkinson. We're speaking in French mostly.
Mm, okay. So you meet him there.
Right, right.
Mm.
But he used to be completely at ease in English, and it's less so now with age. And also with Parkinson, people think that once you're over 85 with Parkinson, senility comes in more strongly. So he has memory, he has I've it's not easy all the time to live with. So
Yeah.
that's what I say in Seasons of Love. We have had hurdles.
Yeah.
and their daily hurdles.
Hmm. Um, interesting. Senility has its roots, same root as senex. And I've often thought about, like from an archetypal perspective, what it means to become senile. And is that more of the Senex coming in, more of Saturn coming in? Have you thought in this way about this disease?
No, and it's very close to Alzheimer's. Of course, we try not to speak of that. His mother had it, his grandfather had it. That's why I prefer, in speaking about it, to use the word senility. So I haven't thought much about it, but I'm thinking also that there's the puer, there's the child in senility
Yeah.
at the same time. And if we can focus on that, because there is a playfulness
Hmm.
in senility. But I haven't developed these ideas at all, but it's there and I can see it. And it would be interesting to bring that out
I think so. Yeah.
because we need to honor one another.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it would be really helpful. I think the kind of the view of dementia or senility. I don't know if you can hear my dog right now, but I think there's a delivery person coming to the door.
No,
Okay, I'm just gonna wait a second
right.
till my wife catches her or whatever's going on out there.
Yes, you've been, how long have you been married?
Okay, she's settled down. Uh, we're in our 18th year of marriage now.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay.
Which
Right.
seems, in one sense, it seems like we've been married a long time. But then when I hear that you've been married for 66, 67 years, I go, oh my God, we're just babies starting out.
Right. Right.
But I think because the kind of the contemporary view of dementia, of senility, is so focused on cognitive decline, on the neurobiology, I haven't really seen anyone take a kind of a depth psychological or archetypal view of it, which I think would help those who are living with it and living with loved ones who are suffering from it, have a richer, deeper understanding of it, and maybe it would ease some of the suffering that can happen.
I think you're right, and it interests me,
Hmm.
and it would be very helpful for us together as I do that. I know it. I can see it. So it's good to think about. It's good to do.
Hmm. Okay. I wanted to talk to you about some of the themes that come up in this book around marriage. The idea of courtship. I thought was very sweet what you wrote about that. Can you speak about the role of courtship in this long-lasting marriage?
I I really think it's essential along. I speak about courtship and commitment. Courtship, first of all, I think we have to we want to continue to court the other and not take the other for granted. And so we want to be appealing. We want to seduce. And I love that word. I
Hmm.
mean, God seduced, I've forgotten which prophet, but I want to seduce my husband
Hmm.
and I still want to. So I still want to court him. And that it comes through the day. It comes the way I dress, what I do, things that I know that he appreciates. Courtship. I think that if we continue that courtship, and it can be physical love where we're still fortunate to be able to continue sleeping together, but just being close to one another, that physical touch, the hand on the shoulder, I think is vital to a relationship.
Hmm.
And I want him to court me. I want him to pay attention
Hmm.
to how he looks.
Yeah, that was so refreshing for me to hear. Because I think sometimes that can be viewed as like, you're kind of uh, you're either like changing yourself to keep your partner attracted, and so somehow that's disempowering, or on the other side, you're expecting your partner to do things that that you want, and this is seen as like somehow hindering someone's independence. But I think there's really something to that, is like wanting to be attractive to your partner. Like the attraction
Mhm.
is what keeps you together, and to
I
not lose
definitely.
sight of that.
Mhm. That's how I describe what I think love is that physical force that attracts.
Like you said, those little Scottish Terrier magnets from your youth,
That's right.
right?
Yeah,
Little black and white
right.
dogs that
Yeah,
attract and repel, and there's that dynamic there.
yeah.
So you see that as a good definition of love, is the force that attracts?
It's the force between us, between and people that I meet and relationships in the world. It's this, there's that song, it's love that makes the world go round, but I think it's true.
Hmm. Well,
It's love,
Captain and Tennille from my youth in the 70s, love will keep us together.
Mhm. Yes, it's all, it, that is, that's all that there is, and it's what's most important.
Hmm. And love isn't something that just happens. It's something that we can, cultivate or invoke. How would you see that? Our participation in that, in the renewal of that, that it's a kind of, it's a work or a responsibility, right?
I think it is, it's making me think of soul also.
Hmm.
You nourish it.
Hmm.
We feed our soul, we nourish our relationship, we nourish our love, and we can feel it, and we become that quote that Jung has where he realized that we are we can be recipients of soul and we can be overflowing with love.
Hmm.
But to do so, we nourish it.
Hmm.
And it's so much more pleasant to live that way.
Hmm.
And I have a sister-in-law who died, and in her journal, she said, you have to have a prejudice of love before with when you meet someone. And if you have that, if you go toward that person with 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 a prejudice of love, it, it's a wonderful way to meet people.
Prejudice of love. What a great phrase. Do you know she came up with that?
This is my French sister-in-law, the one that I replaced. She died when she was 21 and I was 21.
Hmm.
She had an early cancer and it
Wow.
was in her journal. So she had been suffering. She was in bed the last 3 months of her life. And it was my mother-in-law who told me that that was in her journal. I did not see the journal. I'm sorry that I did not. And my mother-in-law and father-in-law have passed away. I don't know if I could find that journal, but I know it word by word. And in French, il faut avoir un préjugé d'amour quand vous rencontrez quelqu'un.
Hmm. Wow. What a beautiful attitude for
Yeah,
life,
yes,
to have a prejudice for love. Wow. That's a title of a book or a song or something. We
it
got to
could
do
be.
something with that. Sounds like something Simone Weil might have said. Um, what about like I like the idea of seasons of love too. It reminded me of Marion Woodman. There's a wonderful film that I recommend to couples struggling in marriage often. It's called Dancing in the Flames. And in that film, Marion and her husband talk about their marriage as being a series of marriages, acknowledging that as we go through life together and we're both on our spiritual path or individuation path, that our individual lives might often take us apart. And that in order for the marriage to continue, there'll have to be times where we come together and we kind of see where we're both at. Do we still share compatible dreams? Are we still attracted to each other? And if so, then the marriage kind of begins again. from that point.
Right,
And I
right.
love that acknowledgement that like we all go through seasons of life, and that the marriage will also go through these different seasons, some of which are winter seasons where the ground is fallow and it doesn't seem like much is
Mhm.
happening or it's dried up. I think that's such a helpful kind of framework or image for people. There's less
Yeah.
expectation that we should always be happy, that there should always be attraction and desire, and the flame should always be, sometimes the flames are like, they're burning very low. We got to do everything
Correct.
we can to
Right,
keep it going,
right.
right?
I think so. Yeah. We, first with, I have two ideas. First with seasons, I think that if we make it our strength to live with the seasons, the length of a marriage and also each year, we know that after winter there'll be spring.
Just the way it is.
That's how it is. And as we now at 90 are approaching death, to know that after winter there'll be spring is a beautiful way to to die, to approach death.
Hmm.
And it is very calming.
Mm,
We have no idea what spring is going to bring, what spring will be, but we have I have that pulsion within me that lives the seasons, and it has helped me and is helping me right now.
mm. To be attuned
So
to those
that's the
rhythms of.
seasons,
Mm,
right. And it's not just the seasons of a long marriage, but it's the seasons of each year
hmm.
within the marriage. And then as I mentioned, I think in Seasons of Love, I talk about how early in our marriage we were in a movement called Les Équipes Notre Dame, which has suggests teams of Our Lady for conjugal spirituality, how to live your faith as a couple rather than as two separate individuals. I think we have to do it as separate individuals and as a couple.
Hmm.
I, I'm not just all couple. And so to be one of the things that they suggest in this movement is a daily sit down, a monthly sit down. It's a monthly couples date. And we started doing that from when my husband was doing his military service. We were in southern France. So it was like 1 year after our marriage, we started a monthly sit down, and we have continued.
Hmm.
So we're always having this moment together. We'll go out to dinner, we'll do something special. Time to look at where we are, what maybe we'll do one thinking especially about one of our children or about myself or but that has helped us enormously and has now become sometimes doing an active imagination together,
Mm.
which is most unusual if you think of a Frenchman who has Parkinson willing to sit down. We sit down together, he does his, I do mine. We look for an image. We think about something that we did yesterday or something in the room where we're sitting. And once we have the image, then we describe it. We don't share at that point. So I have my journal, he has his, and we're writing a description of the image. And then we ask the image what it has to teach us. Why has it come to us? What what do you have to tell me? And we write a dialogue as if we're talking to the image. And that was what I was telling you earlier about seeing these images as images of my soul. And only at the end do we share.
Hmm.
But
In
that
terms of
share is
reflecting on the.
really sharing, it's very deep.
Mm,
We're really there sharing our souls.
mm, beautiful. Yeah. I was thinking of the diagram that you include in the book, where there's a circle with P for Pierre, a circle for with S for Susan, and then there's a circle, a bit larger circle that overlaps those other two
Right.
circles. So maintaining your individuality, but the relationship as a larger whole that contains you, connects you, but doesn't you don't get lost in.
That's right. Right. And we have to keep feeding that. We
Hmm.
can't just live from memories of happy times. We have to still go out to a restaurant maybe sometime. We still have to do something to feed that circle in the middle.
Hmm. I'm learning that almost 20 years in, I'm learning how important that is. Uh,
Mhm.
my wife and I just went out for a dinner the other night, and we are saying we got to do this more regularly because it creates a kind of, we can sit down at home and have a dinner, but she was noticing that the quality of the conversation was much different when we were kind of around this little table with a candle on it, and there's other people around, but we're in a kind of our own enclosed space where there's much more attention given to each other, and like a space opens up for conversation that we might not have otherwise.
I think so. We can call it a temenos.
A temenos, like a temple.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
Sacred
I like
space.
that.
Yeah.
Hmm. Sacred space at the local pub.
That's right. With a
I
glass of
love it.
wine.
Yeah, invoking Dionysus. I was also thinking, it just occurred to me that that diagram with the S and the P, that
Yeah.
um, it also, it harkens back to those little terrier salt and pepper shakers, the S and the P.
Yes, they do. But I showed that to somebody. I had X's, and they
Uh,
thought I was talking about chromosomes. And that wasn't my thought at all. So then instead of putting PY, I could have. But I just put, well, I only call him Pierre in the book. He's Pierre Yves.
uh,
It's a double
PY.
name, but throughout the book, I call him Pierre. And I do talk about that little design. 1 minute.
Hmm.
Here it is.
Yeah,
And look at what happened to it when I took the photo. Do you see
the
that
top is
it's
lighter than the bottom, right?
blue on almost on the top and dark brown on the bottom? It was just this was the first one. I just did it in pencil.
Hmm.
And then I put it against the screen and took a picture, and lo and behold, it became light and dark and blue all around on the top, the blue behind the top half, and beige behind the bottom half.
Yeah, so the heaven and the earth, the vertical
Yeah,
dimension is
it
there.
was, I can't explain it.
What I also find interesting too is that the P and the S is not really a circle, but it looks more like an egg,
True.
which is meaningful.
Yeah, yeah,
What is the marriage giving birth to?
right.
Hmm. In your case, I mean, other than, of course, you've had like many children and you've got grandchildren and all of that, but what else has the marriage given birth to?
We hope that we're sharing our happiness. We have a bit of light
Hmm.
in all that we do.
Um, it must be important to you to want to pass on some of the things that have helped you throughout your long life and marriage. Because why else write a book at this stage? Um, how does that, like, how do you think of the role of the elder in our culture?
Probably it's not honored and respected. People, I'm going to sound old fashioned. I am old fashioned, but always putting our senior citizens in homes for senior citizens is not ideal. We get away from the family. I don't think a week goes by where we don't see one of our, I, I see our daughter, I have a daughter who, where I don't see somebody from the family. And like the one in Brooklyn, she came in, now that we're in our 90s, they're taking turns every month. They come for a longer stay. And the one that lives close by comes almost twice a week. She's always calling to be certain. But that intergenerational aspect of life, I think maybe is not honored enough. We're happy to say, well, yes, you're going to be in a wonderful, comfortable residence. You'll have everything you want, and your meals will be served. I'm talking about, I mean, we are on the list for a residence if ever we have to go, because I just can't, one of us can't cope. But so I think that there'd be something more to do for older people. I think Marion Woodman talked about that. Her book, Bone, I think is because I do a lot with journaling and active imagination, I often refer to Bone. I mean, it's her journal. And she, just to her very definition of a journal, that it's a mirror of her truth. It's in writing in her journal that she discovers herself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I go back to your question was, how do we see elders? I think we could do more.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've lost something there.
Yeah, and I think some of the responsibility lies in the older people to feel a sense of responsibility to act as elder rather than kind of living their second childhood, which maybe that's more of a North American thing. I don't know, but it's something that we see here quite a lot. And I know many people my age feel a kind of absence of elders around us. And,
Mhm.
that's led me to like reach out to people like yourself and want to have deeper conversations with people who have lived a whole life and a life of depth and inquiry, you know.
Mhm.
Um, that's really important to kind of fill that void of the elder in my personal life and my family, unfortunately.
Mhm.
So you must feel like some responsibility. I mean, it seems like you've been very active in keeping the family together, working through family difficulties, making sure the family doesn't like get fractured.
Well, you know some of the difficulties. I mean, they've been there
Hmm.
from the book, and living through them has kept us together. And it's also that we could keep his French family together. It was quite amazing. We have suffered through incest, and to keep his family, there were 8 brothers, 10 children, 2 daughters, and to keep that whole family together, to recognize what happened and to feel responsible. As you saw, I have the document that we all signed in the book. I think is a testament to what can be done, the unity of a family. It's extraordinary.
Hmm. Well, and I think like what's so important to that is the guidance of the elders who can lead by example. Like that story you tell, it's a terrible story about the revelations of I think it was Pierre's father or grandfather, right? And incest. But the way that you persevered through the difficulties of it, but the way like what you came to with that declaration of recognition
Right,
signed by members of the family that this happened and it would be a lasting document, that this wouldn't be swept under the carpet. Uh,
right,
I thought that was like incredibly profound because so often now in our culture we're kind of taught to heal our trauma on our own as individuals. And I think what really heals is for the pain to be held by a larger group, like a family or a community. And it's not just all on the individual to do their personal healing work.
right. Oh, and of course, I talked with everyone involved in the family in our situation, and that I had to persuade a few of them, but they all agreed and they all know that it is brought out into the open in my book.
Mm.
And I feel it's important. There's another book that was published a few years back, La Grande Famille. I won't go into it, but it's a similar situation and it's a horrific story. It did not end well and it was hidden. And I really want to, and that's my daughter who was abused, has been on television in Switzerland to try to bring people an awareness, but let them come forth and admit it and share it, because that's the beginning of their healing. But it's also the beginning of a sharing so that through abuse, others come forward. And she feels very strongly that this book is necessary for that. For just, I say on the back of the book that it is a call for integrity,
Mm-hmm.
integrity in everything.
Mm-hmm. What do you think it means to have personal integrity, first of all?
Well, I think it takes a lifetime. I think you're talking a bit about individuation, about knowing who we are,
Mm-hmm.
knowing where where's our shadow, what are we doing, how are we? I mean, it's so evident sometimes when we feel that somebody is not doing something correctly. Of course, we're projecting our own self on that person, or not our own self. We're projecting our weakness on that person. So personal integrity, I think, is very hard, but it's something to work on all the time, almost. I don't think it's ever, I wonder if it's ever really given. What do you,
Yeah, well, I think it requires you, first of all, to know yourself. And so that project is never ending.
yeah, that's what I mean.
Because you got to keep learning about yourself, right?
Hmm.
And discovering new things about yourself as like life happens and you respond to new and different situations.
Yeah,
And I think like integrity is being not only true to like the soul's desire, to who you are as a person, but also like maybe it has to do with something like being true to the fact that you never really fully know yourself. And so there has to be
yeah, I agree.
humility.
That's what I meant by it takes a lifetime. We're always working on it.
Mhm. To remain like in integrity with self, soul, God, community. Like it's interrelate relational too, right?
Yes.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, it's a word that gets thrown around a lot, and I like to look into these words that we kind of take for granted and try to like
You mean
understand them.
integrity is thrown around?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I had truth first. Uh, but it almost one of my children who is divorced said it almost is too specific. It will make some of the readers feel that you're talking about being truthful about an affair in marriage, and I'm not at all.
Mm,
And so I went in the direction of integrity, which to me somehow is deeper than the word truth in this instance.
right. Well, to be in integrity could mean that you don't share everything, right? That you're not completely radically honest or. Is that what you're getting
Uh,
at? Like it goes deeper than truth. It's not just a kind of a program for integrity. Like integrity means to be always truthful and always open and honest or something like that.
well, that's what you were saying. It depends upon self-integrity.
Mm,
Before you can aim for integrity in a marriage, it, you're back to this little
yeah.
diagram. You're both working.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, is there anything else that you'd like to leave with people listening to this who are
We were talking about,
uh-huh.
we weren't talking, but in our exchange of emails about the soul of marriage. And I again would say that it's two individual souls and then a soul coming together. This is the soul of marriage.
Right.
I see that, right?
The whole.
You don't just become one.
Yeah.
And so the soul of marriage would have to be tempered to realize that we're also talking about the soul of each of the two individuals.
Hmm.
And it's almost brought me to feeling it's the soul of love.
Mm.
What is the soul of love? And it's an abîme. Is that word in French or in English? An abyss.
And
Yeah,
abyss. One
yeah,
of those questions that you've got to just keep living without searching for going after the answer. Like,
yeah.
yeah, wasn't that Rilke who had that line about living the questions? Something like that. It's more important to live the questions than to come to a conclusion to
Yeah.
find an answer.
Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
Yes.
What is the soul of love? I
Yeah.
think I love leaving these conversations on a question and leaving the audience with a question to ponder for the rest of their
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
What is
I
the soul
will.
of love?
And also the role of my role, the role of the elders and the senex, the word senility. I think that you have given me really a path to follow there and to think through and it will
Hmm.
help us in our marriage.
Hmm. And I think it could help others too. Like I've done some writing over the years as elders that I revere suffered dementia. You know, I had the guru of my yoga lineage. He went through that, which was a total shock for someone who had taken care of himself for. So it's not something you blame on diet or lifestyle. It's something that happened, and so it forced me to look at like, well, what could be like the deeper meaning of what's going on here? And I thought about how his quote unquote dementia was causing, from the reports, was causing him to become more inward, more isolated, more withdrawn. And I thought actually that if we looked at it in a spiritual sense, this is somebody maybe getting closer to God and distancing themselves from the external world, now that all their responsibilities have fulfilled. He's done like
Mhm.
so much work in the world. And maybe now, so this is his time to draw inward in preparation for death. And I thought the same thing when Robert Bly went through that. And people are so quiet around it. I think there's a lot of shame if someone that we revere as a kind of an intellectual leader or something like that, if they then suffer this, I think there's still so much blame on the person that they must have done something wrong or not done enough Sudoku or
Mhm.
whatever it is. But I think if we see it as like this like withdrawing to get closer to God in preparation for death, it changed my whole feeling around it.
Right,
But
right.
I heard resistance from people when I would bring up this alternative perspective. Like it was somehow glossing over the brutal reality of that kind of situation for the family and so on. And I just thought
Yeah.
that that's so kind of subjective.
I think we have to, that's what I think we have to honor that. I agree with you. And that means also not, as older people, we feel sometimes that nobody wants to know our voice. The way life is going today, everything is young, fast, quick. You have to do this 100 things at once, and so we're useless.
Get left behind because of
Yeah,
slowness and
right.
hmm yeah, it's funny. There's a new uniform edition of James Hillman's that's just been released on depression, and it's one of the key themes in that book is he's kind of diagnosing our culture as a manic culture, and depression, melancholia slows everything down. It's a wonderful book and a beautiful alternate perspective on depression. He calls depression melancholy without the gods, which I think is
Yep.
really great.
Yep.
But it speaks to what you're saying is like in our manic culture, slowness, there's no time for slowness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're always racing the clock and information is moving faster and people are going through different states as they engage with this little hermetic screen, you know,
Right.
like going through all these different emotions. There's the wildfires, there's a cute puppy being born. There's, you know, it's just like cycling through these emotional states and not a lot of time to slow down and be with for an extended
Right.
period. Not a lot of
Right.
time for soul making, I'd say.
For soul making, to simplify, all of this comes to the same thing. And what are we going, this would be a whole nother podcast, but what are we going to do with artificial intelligence? And
Oh
where are
yeah.
we going with it? And what is happening on Facebook today? I mean, we need
Yeah.
people who say stop, uh,
Yeah, let's slow down here.
pause. Yeah,
I call it, you know, people say like, oh, that brought up a red flag for me. I always say, like when I'm working with people, I said, oh, I get a yellow light when you say that, which just means slow down and pay attention, right? The yellow
right,
traffic signal. It's not to
yeah,
stop, not rush ahead, but like, let's just slow down here.
right, right. I
Yeah.
think Thomas More uses the word pause.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's take a pause and
Mhm.
circle around this thing for a while. Try to see it from all different angles. Okay, so what is the soul of love? Well, maybe it has something to do with slowing down. Maybe love needs us to step outside of the race toward what? I don't know, but to be
Mhm.
with, to pause, time to sit in that bath together, you know, that bath of alchemy
Yeah, yeah,
in that kind of low heat. Like it's not always just fire raging, right? Like alchemy brings in so many different images for quality of heat. You know, the slow burning horse dung and
yeah,
the the bath, right? I just got an image of you and Pierre sitting in a hot tub somewhere, sitting in that bath.
yeah, yeah. Good.
I'm
We'll
sure
do it.
that's happened a few times.
Yeah.
The Alpine hot tub. Okay.
So put that in with your idea of the soul of marriage, a hot tub, or the soul of love. Yeah,
Love and marriage needs a
needs a
hot
hot
tub.
tub.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
Well, Susan, it's been really wonderful speaking with you. I'm grateful for the time. I know it's late there, it's early here, and so that's what we need to do to make it work. And so thanks for being so accommodating.
I'm happy to do so, and I just would so like to help people have the happiness that we have had in our relationship, to live the seasons of love, and to see marriage as a conjunctio, as a coming together that never grows old.
Mm, mm. Will you
We
include
grow
maybe
old.
as a final image, you include this image from Ovid, the two trees, you know,
Yes,
the two
yes.
old people who turn into trees.
Well, Philemon and Balkis, it's a wonderful story.
Yeah. Can you just give a little taste of that?
So it's from Ovid, Balkis and Philemon. The gods are coming. I think it's
Jupiter
Zeus
and
and
Hermes.
Hermes. Well, it's Zeus and Hermes, yes.
Okay. Hmm.
Yep. Are coming to the earth because they have heard that people are not getting along, people are not living correctly, and so they want to see if they will be welcomed into the homes that they visit. And they go from home to home and nobody welcomes them, and they arrive at this little old at a cottage which is weather beaten and is itself small, and they knock on the door, and the couple. Baucis is the woman, Philemon is the man. They open the door and they welcome these guests, not knowing who they are. And they go out. Philemon goes into the garden and gets the greens so that they can cook something for them. The woman starts the fire and has a pot going. And they want to offer a meal to these people. They welcome them. There's stories that go in and out of it that they want to kill the goose. They only have one goose, and finally the gods don't want them to kill the goose, so they're protecting the goose while the couple is trying to help it. And finally, as the dinner starts and as the jug of wine keeps filling, signs that we know in other myths, they realize that they are the gods, that they have welcomed the gods into their home. And the gods, because of their hospitality in the story, offer them one wish. And their wish is to die together and be together forever. So the gods will grant them that wish. And as they're leaving, they're climbing a hill, saying goodbye to them, and they look down, and all the rest of the houses have been flooded. Only their house remains, and it has become a temple. And they take care of the temple until it's their time to die. And when it's their time to die, they see the other becoming a tree. And they realize that each one is becoming a tree side by side. I think it's a linden tree. I forgot what the second one is.
Linden and oak, I think.
Linden and oak. So I guess it would be Philemon, the man, the oak, and the linden, the woman. They're side by side. And the story ends with there being two trees side by side. And these two trees are side by side. They're not one, but they have the roots, and they're roots that are like in the collective unconscious, bringing them together with the rest of the world. And that is the end of Ovid's story, told the way I tell it.
Yeah, no, I love it. And beautiful image to leave us with. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Brian, for having me, and keep your podcast bringing light into the world around us. We need them.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Take care. Say hi to Pierre for us.
I will. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.